Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of Matchbook. This month we're throwing it even further back than we did last time. So go grab a hot drink and whatever you need to pass through some standing stones with me and talk about 2 books that have a basis in historical fact. Okay, I think I'm ready. So the 2 books we're going over today are His Bloody Project by Graeme Macrae Burnet, and this takes place in 1869 in the Scottish Highlands and is about a series of murders done by a man named Roderick Macrae. And then we have A Spy Named Orphan by Roland, and this documents the life of Donald Maclean, who was a Soviet spy in the Cambridge 5 spy ring during World War II and the Cold War. So let's get started. Okay, so did you like Serial? Because I liked Serial. I have listened to the first season of Serial by Sarah Koenig probably 15 to 20 times, and I still can't figure out exactly what's happening. Those of you who don't know, Serial is about a man named Adnan Syed who got convicted of murdering his girlfriend back in 1999. There was not enough evidence to convict him. There's not a lot of DNA evidence. There's a lot of different witness testimony. People's stories keep changing. And even having listened to the podcast as many times as I have, I still can't figure it out. If you're into that, you're gonna be into this. So this book is about a man named Roderick Macrae, who is in jail for murdering 3 people. And he never denies doing it. He fully admits his guilt, and he writes about his experience and the events leading up to the murder while he is awaiting trial. So the author starts off with a bunch of statements from his neighbors to sort of give sort of a character analysis almost from his neighbors, from people who didn't like him, all this stuff. So you already, off the bat, you have no idea how to feel about this guy. And then you jump right into his account of what goes on. And Roderick's account is probably my favorite part of the book. And I don't know how I feel about that, because this guy did murder 3 people, like that's a fact. And he talks about the events leading up to it. And if it was a show like Game of Thrones, you would be rooting him on and cheering that he gets revenge for his family. But it's not Game of Thrones, it's real life. And it's interesting because his account really humanizes the entire situation and already puts you on the fence about how you feel about him versus the crimes he's committed. So let's dive into the details first. So there's this guy named Lachlan Broad in the village, and he comes into a place of authority, and he has a mission against Roderick's family. He takes land away from them, he finds them a bunch, he's sleeping with Roderick's sister, and things just get progressively worse. The family is having a harder time providing for themselves. Roderick's sister ends up pregnant and unfortunately ends up hanging herself. And so Roderick decides that he has no other choice but to kill Lachlan Broad for the sake of his father. And one of his experiences leading up to this decision is that he actually falls in love with Lachlan's daughter, Flora. And they hang out a bunch, and Flora really only seems to want to hang out because of the risk it is. Like, it's fun because she knows that if her father were to catch them, he would beat both of them to a pulp. And so she really only hangs around him because it's risky and it's fun sneaking around. But when Roderick actually confronts her and tells her basically that he hopes that they'll get married, she laughs it off and just totally shuts him down. So he decides to kill her father, and he just goes out one day, it's his mission, and he ends up murdering both Flora and her little brother. And he claims it was because they were already in the house when he arrives, that if they hadn't been there, he wouldn't have killed them. They were just in the way. And so he has to get rid of them just, strategically, I guess. So he ends up killing all 3 of them and, leaves the house, walks back to his house just covered in blood, gets arrested, and his memoir sort of goes through some of his time in jail and then ends right before his trial starts. And that's all the information that we have from him. And then we get the medical reports that come in the book after we've read Roderick's tale. And that's where things also start to get a little bit iffy. The main thing is that in the autopsy report for Flora, it finds that her pelvis was smashed. And Roderick does not talk about doing this in his memoir. He talks about, killing her the way he did everybody else by smashing the tool over her head. When he's confronted about it, I think it's in the trial, he claims that he does not remember doing that at all. And that detail sort of points to me, at least, that he didn't just kill her because she was in the way. Smashing her pelvis after he was in love with her and she turned him down definitely seems like a more emotional act of violence rather than just a cold-blooded, you're in my way, I have to get you out of here because my real mission is to kill your dad, but you're just in my way. Smashing her pelvis is definitely much more of an emotional response than her just being in his way. And like I mentioned at the beginning, there's witness testimony that opens up the book. And, so you have tales from his neighbors talking about, he was a nice guy, seemed normal. You have a teacher who talks about how he was a really good student, very smart. And then you also have people who say that he was a loner and that he used to talk to himself. So you don't really know if this guy is crazy or if there's just some sort of screw loose where he can justify this in his mind. You don't really know, because when you read his memoir, it's not, this unemotional sort of thing. When you're reading his side of the story, he very much comes across as someone who deeply cares about his family and, has sort of high hopes for his life and, absolutely had the ability to leave this town and do something great, but he ends up staying out of loyalty to his family tradition and to the town, and he ends up, it's really stressed that he does this because of his father. He wants to get rid of this horrible person that his father has been dealing with for years. So it's very bizarre sort of getting his emotional side when you're reading his story and then putting together, you have to remind yourself, because it's a well-written memoir and you end up feeling bad for him, and you have to remind yourself, no, this guy killed 3 people and killed this girl very violently, and it's hard to sort of put together. So you sort of have different eyewitness testimony, you have his side of the story, you have the autopsies, details sort of not fully lining up about the intensity of this murder, these murders, I should say. And then there's one other thing that the author threw in there that threw me off. So there is a chapter in here called Extract from Travels in the Borderlands of Lunacy by James Bruce Thompson, who was a real person and who published in the Edinburgh Medical Journal and the Journal of Mental Science between 1860 and 1870. However, Travels in the Borderlands of Lunacy is made up by the author Graeme Macrae Burnet, and he doesn't say that at the start of the book. He writes in the acknowledgments, James Bruce Thompson was a real person, and the articles mentioned in the text can be found online. The theories propounded by Mr. Thompson in the novel are closely based on these articles, but his personality and character are the products of my imagination, as is his memoir. But that's in the acknowledgments, which normally I wouldn't read if I'm reading a book. So him not being upfront about that definitely threw me off. And because in the preface, he writes, well, I have to preface the preface. There's a lot of talk about how Roderick Macrae's memoir has to be a hoax. There's no way someone of his background could be able to write this, sort of like Shakespeare. Well, people say, there's no way this guy was able to write such incredible stories. People are talking about how there's no way he could have written something so eloquent if he comes from this background and he's from this town. And one of the things that this author writes in the preface to support the fact that this memoir is real, because the memoir is real. Roderick Macrae's memoir is real. It is in an archive in Inverness in Scotland. But he writes, "The fact that Roderick could have written the memoir does not, of course, prove that he did. For this we have the evidence of the psychiatrist James Bruce Thompson, whose own memoir attests to having seen the document in Roderick's cell." Why would you write that if you made up James Bruce Thompson's memoir in this book? It doesn't seem like a solid piece of evidence if you made up his personality and his memoir and include an extract from a made-up book in this book. I don't know. Maybe it just adds another layer to the mystery. That's the one thing that just threw me off about the whole thing, was that he wasn't upfront about it, and that, yeah, just that he wasn't upfront about it. So you could read this whole book and not read the acknowledgments and think this was a real extract from a real document that this real person wrote, but it's the real person, but the document's fake. And I don't know. Regardless, I really suggest you read this book. It was a fascinating read. It's a quick read. It really sort of keeps you going, and I want to hear your thoughts about it. If you think his neighbor's witness testimony is more accurate, or his own memoir is more accurate, if you even think it's written by him. Some people think his lawyer wrote it for him, and what you think about the medical reports as well. So our second book follows the life of Donald Maclean, and he was a spy in the Cambridge 5 spy ring and passed information to Russia during World War II and into the Cold War. And so it documents his life from a very early age through his career as a spy, and talks about how he had gotten interested in communism, but he always had to keep his own political opinions suppressed because his father was a prominent political figure and he couldn't mess with his father's reputation. So he gets approached when he's in college, and he joins this circle of spies, and his first code name is Orphan, which is where the title comes from, although his spy name, code name, changes several times over his career. So Donald had a very high level position in the British Foreign Office. This made it very easy for him to pass documents back and forth because there was no security really with classified documents. There was a rule like you're not supposed to take highly classified documents out of the building, but there wasn't actually anybody to stand guard and check before you left the building or before you left the room with the documents. It was based on an honor system, which shocked me and clearly didn't work. And so it was very easy for him to pass information that he received or that passed through his desk over to Russia. Donald Maclean also was very much an alcoholic and addicted to smoking, and it was a result because of this double life he was leading. But it states in this book that he was really very good at doing what he did, even so much to the fact where even when people were figuring out that he was a spy, they still were like, no, it cannot be him. There's no way it could be him. He was someone who had to stay productive in order to feel fulfilled in life. There's a span of a few years, I think, where Russia is sort of suspecting him. They're not sure if he's turned or which side he's on, so they don't really communicate with him for a while, and he just goes stir crazy because he just needed to feel like he was doing something in order to feel sane. And he has a few relationships, and the woman he ends up marrying, he ends up telling her that he's a spy because he's lying to everyone else around him that he just needed someone where he could be completely honest with her 24/7. And she actually ends up helping him a lot. She sort of becomes the wife that hosts dinner parties with, high political figures to build connections and sort of help him along to gain information and things like that. And so as his career goes on, he's very good at his double life. He would go to work, be very composed, and then go out drinking, and all hell would break loose because of all of the stress of leading this double life. And he had some very close calls to blowing his cover, and miraculously somehow didn't. I don't know how that's possible. But it gets worse and worse as time goes on, and he's living this double life to the point where just he can't even stand it anymore. You know, like the other book that I just talked about, it's a very humanizing of him to read this, you know, because he's definitely struggling, and, you know, he's leading this double life, but he's definitely having issues that he's dealing with by drinking and smoking and, you know, getting into fights. However, he is betraying his country. And if you think this book is gonna end with him getting caught, you're gonna be disappointed, like I was. I did not realize that Donald Maclean does escape to Russia and live out the rest of his life there. His family ends up escaping to Russia, you know, a few years later. So I was reading these points where the intelligence offices are starting to figure out that it's him, and I was getting really excited, and I was like, oh, they're gonna get him. And no, he successfully ends up in Russia just to live out the rest of his life. And then his body gets brought back to the UK after he dies. So that kind of sucks. But, you know, oh well, I guess. All that aside, though, this book was a really interesting read, and I am glad I read it. It's a period of history that I do like reading and learning about a lot. It was interesting to see how Roland Phillips goes through Donald Maclean's life, and really, at the end of the day, a human can only go through so much stress before they hit a breaking point. That's what really sort of got me was, you know, this guy, you know, of his own volition, you know, but he very much suffered a lot and couldn't really be honest with anybody except for his wife, you know, and I can't really imagine what that would be like, where you just have to lie about everything all the time and pretend like everything's okay all the time when you're really struggling, because fucking up would mean getting arrested in your own country or getting murdered by the country that you're spying for. It's a lot. This book is not as easy of a read as his Bloody Project is. It's written much more formally, much more adult, I would say. So it sort of reads like an essay, and you have to have your full attention on it in order to fully absorb everything that you're taking in. At least I did. This isn't really a book you can read anytime. It's not a relaxing read. So you really do need to have your full attention on this book if you're gonna go pick it up. But if you like history and you like a good spy story, this is definitely for you. So let me know if you guys end up picking up these books, and let's discuss, especially this one. I want to know your thoughts about this one, but let's discuss this one too. And next time I have a really exciting newsletter. We are going to go over 2 books that I wouldn't normally read. So I am reading a horror book. I'm reading It by Stephen King, and I will be reading an autobiography that I've yet to decide on. But in addition to reading It, I am going to get together with my writer-director friend, Anthony Rouse, who writes and directs horror films, and we are going to discuss what makes something scary, either in written form or in movie form, and why one media will be scarier than the other or not, or why or why not. And I'm very excited about it. It should be a very interesting discussion. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining me.